Chosen one. For years, you believed the story had already ended. That every door between you and your soulmate had quietly closed forever. You tried to convince yourself that nothing could ever change what had already been decided. But today, something happened that no one in that courtroom was prepared to witness. The final divorce papers were placed in front of your soulmate. And just as everyone expected one simple signature, everything suddenly stopped. Listen carefully. Because this message is not about coincidence. It is about a hidden truth that remained buried for years. A truth carrying your name, waiting for the exact moment when it could no longer stay hidden. The courtroom had fallen completely silent. The attorneys believed this would be the shortest hearing of the day. Family members sat with tired expressions, convinced that every emotion had already been exhausted. Even the judge expected nothing more than a routine signature before closing the file forever. Your soulmate slowly reached for the pen. Every eye followed that single movement. It looked as though the final chapter of your shared destiny was about to end with one simple stroke of ink. But then, something unexpected happened. Just before the pen touched the paper, an old envelope quietly slid across the table. No one had noticed who had placed it there. There was no return address. No explanation. Only a few handwritten words on the front. Read this before you sign. Your soulmate froze. Their hands began to tremble. The room, once filled with whispered conversations, became completely silent. Even those who had insisted this divorce was the only possible outcome suddenly sensed that something far greater was unfolding. For several long seconds, your soulmate simply stared at the envelope without opening it. It felt strangely familiar. Almost as if they had seen that handwriting somewhere years before. Memories they had tried desperately to bury began returning one after another. Forgotten conversations. Broken promises. Unanswered questions. And one face they had never truly erased from their heart. Then, with shaking fingers, they finally opened it. Inside was a single folded letter. The first sentence instantly drained every bit of color from their face. They whispered only one word. Impossible. No one else could understand what they had just read. But whatever was written inside that letter had shattered everything they believed about the past. Every lie that had kept you apart suddenly began falling apart inside their mind. Their breathing became heavier. The pen slipped from their hand. One tear quietly landed on the unsigned divorce papers. The attorney leaned forward, confused. Is something wrong? Your soulmate couldn't answer. Instead, they read the letter again. Slower this time. As if hoping the words would somehow change. But they didn't. Every sentence pointed toward one heartbreaking truth. You had never abandoned them. You had never betrayed them. Someone else had carefully created that illusion. And both of you had spent years suffering because of it. Across the courtroom, nervous whispers began spreading. Family members exchanged worried glances. The judge patiently waited, sensing that this hearing had suddenly become something far more serious than a legal proceeding. Your soulmate closed their eyes. Years of anger, regret, confusion, and unanswered pain crashed together all at once. Then, without warning, they pushed the divorce papers away. "I can't sign these." The entire courtroom froze. Don't skip. Because what happened next would reveal the identity of the person who had secretly manipulated both families for years. And the evidence proving your innocence had been hidden in the most unexpected place imaginable. No one moved. The silence inside the courtroom became heavier than anyone could bear. Every person present stared at your soulmate, waiting for an explanation that refused to come. The judge gently removed his glasses, the attorneys exchanged uncertain looks, and even the relatives who had spent years demanding this divorce suddenly felt an unexpected fear growing inside them. Your soulmate held the letter tightly against their chest as though letting it go would erase the truth they had just discovered. "I need more time," they finally whispered. One attorney immediately objected. "Your Honor, everything has already been agreed upon. The settlement has been finalized. There is no reason to delay these proceedings." But your soulmate slowly stood up. "There is every reason." Those 4 words echoed through the courtroom. Everyone could see the tears filling their eyes, yet this was not the cry of someone losing a marriage. It was the cry of someone realizing they had spent years believing a terrible lie. The judge calmly asked, "What exactly has changed?" Your soulmate looked down at the letter once again. "For years, I believed this person walked away from me. I believed they chose silence. I believed they never wanted to fight for us." Their voice cracked. But this letter proves something completely different. The room became perfectly still. Inside the envelope was more than a single page. Hidden beneath the first letter were several older documents, each carefully folded to keep them from being noticed. There were copies of messages that had never been delivered. Handwritten notes that had mysteriously disappeared before reaching their destination. And one photograph that instantly brought back a forgotten memory. It was a picture taken on the happiest day of your relationship. Written on the back was a sentence your soulmate recognized immediately. "No matter what happens, I will never stop searching for you." Their hands began shaking even harder. "I never received this." The words barely escaped their lips. One elderly family member sitting quietly in the back suddenly lowered their head. Another person avoided eye contact altogether. The pieces of a forgotten puzzle were beginning to fit together. Your soulmate continued reading. Every page uncovered another hidden truth. One message explained how someone had secretly intercepted every attempt you made to reconnect. Another revealed that important phone calls had been blocked before they ever reached your soulmate. Another described how false stories had been repeated so many times that everyone eventually accepted them as reality. Years of separation. Years of regret. Years of blaming the wrong person. All built upon carefully planned deception. Don't skip. Because the next discovery shocked your soulmate even more than the letters themselves. Tucked inside the final page was a small memory card. No label. No explanation. Only 3 handwritten words. Play this alone. Your soulmate stared at it for several long seconds. I don't even know what's on this. One investigator assigned to verify court evidence stepped forward and carefully inserted the memory card into a courtroom computer. The screen remained black for a brief moment. Then, an old audio recording began playing. At first the voice was faint. But within seconds, everyone in the courtroom recognized exactly who was speaking. The room erupted into gasps. Because the person on that recording wasn't confessing to a small misunderstanding. They were calmly admitting that they had deliberately kept you and your soulmate apart. Believing they were protecting the family. Every lie. Every missing message. Every broken promise. Every misunderstanding. Had been planned from the very beginning. Your soulmate covered their mouth in disbelief. The tears they had been holding back finally fell without restraint. I blamed the wrong person. Those quiet words broke every heart in the room. The family members who had defended the lies for years now sat completely speechless. Some couldn't even lift their heads. Others quietly cried, realizing they had unknowingly helped destroy 2 lives built on genuine love. Then your soulmate turned toward the judge. With tears still falling, they spoke words no one expected to hear. I cannot sign these divorce papers today. Because I don't even know whose version of the past I've been living. The judge slowly nodded. But before anyone could respond, the courtroom doors suddenly opened. A stranger walked inside carrying one final sealed envelope. And the name written across the front stopped your soulmate's heartbeat. It was your name. Everything was about to change. Every head in the courtroom turned toward the stranger standing quietly at the entrance. No one recognized them. They weren't a family member. They weren't one of the attorneys. Their name wasn't listed anywhere in the court records. Yet the calm expression on their face suggested they had come for one purpose only: to deliver the final piece of a story that had remained hidden for far too long. The sealed envelope rested carefully in their hands. Across the front, written in unmistakable handwriting, was your name. Your soulmate stared at it without blinking. Their breathing became uneven again. After everything that had already been revealed, they weren't sure they had the strength to discover one more truth. Yet something deep inside whispered that this envelope had been waiting for this exact day. The judge looked toward the stranger. Can you explain why you've interrupted these proceedings? The stranger respectfully nodded. I apologize, Your Honor. I searched for this family for years. I was instructed to deliver this only if these two people ever reached the point of signing divorce papers. Until today, I never found them. The courtroom fell silent again. Years. Not days. Not months. Years. The stranger explained that they had once worked alongside an elderly counselor who had secretly tried to reunite you and your soulmate after realizing dangerous lies had torn you apart. That counselor had gathered letters, photographs, and statements from people who knew the truth. But before everything could be delivered, the counselor unexpectedly passed away. Only one instruction remained. If they ever reach the end of their marriage, give them everything. Your soulmate slowly accepted the envelope. Their hands trembled so much they could barely break the seal. Inside was another handwritten letter. Unlike the first one, this one wasn't written by you. It was written by someone who had watched everything happen from the shadows. The opening sentence made your soulmate's eyes fill with tears once again. The person you blamed was the only one still praying for your happiness. They stopped reading. Their shoulders began shaking. For years they had believed you had forgotten them. Moved on. Stopped caring. But the letter described something completely different. It revealed that while everyone else encouraged anger, resentment, and separation, you had quietly refused to speak badly about your soulmate. Even after your heart was broken. Even after every door seemed closed. You still hoped they would one day learn the truth. You never asked for revenge. You never wished them pain. You simply prayed that one day they would be free from the lies surrounding them. The courtroom grew emotional. Several people wiped tears from their faces. Even one of the attorneys quietly lowered his head. Your soulmate continued reading. Each paragraph uncovered another forgotten memory. There were dates matching days when mysterious phone calls had suddenly disconnected. There were names matching people who had repeatedly insisted you no longer cared. There were receipts proving letters had been mailed, but intercepted before they ever reached their destination. There were statements from neighbors who had witnessed arguments created intentionally by outsiders. Nothing had happened by accident. Every misunderstanding had been carefully engineered. Every silence had been manufactured. Every broken connection had been encouraged by someone determined to keep two hearts apart. Your soulmate finally looked up. I spent years believing the wrong story. Their voice was barely above a whisper. I judged someone who never stopped loving me. A heavy silence filled the room. Some relatives quietly cried. Others refused to meet your soulmate's eyes. Because deep inside, many of them now realized they had ignored warning signs simply because believing the lies had been easier than searching for the truth. Don't skip. Because the greatest surprise had not yet arrived. Hidden beneath the final page was a small velvet pouch. Inside the pouch rested a simple silver ring. Not an expensive ring. Not a wedding ring. Just a small promise ring your soulmate had once given you long before life separated you. Attached to it was a tiny handwritten note. If this ring ever finds its way back to you, don't remember how your story ended. Remember how it truly began. The moment your soulmate saw that ring, they completely broke down. The memories came rushing back all at once. The laughter, the promises, the dreams, the future both of you once planned together before fear, manipulation, and deception changed everything. Tears fell freely onto the courtroom floor. Then, without warning, your soulmate turned toward the judge with eyes full of determination. There is one person I have to find before I make another decision about the rest of my life. The judge looked at the unsigned divorce papers, then back at your soulmate. Just as he was about to respond, a court officer hurried into the room carrying an urgent message. After reading it, the judge's expression completely changed. He slowly looked at your soulmate and said, "There's something you need to know immediately." And the words that followed would change both of your lives forever. The courtroom became so quiet that even the sound of the judge placing the message on his desk seemed impossibly loud. Your soulmate stood frozen, tears still resting on their face, unable to look away. "What is it?" they asked softly. The judge took a slow breath before answering. "This message was delivered to the court only a few minutes ago. It concerns the person whose name has been mentioned throughout today's hearing." Your soulmate's heart began racing. For years they had imagined hundreds of different endings to your story, but none of them had prepared them for this moment. The judge continued carefully. "The information confirms that this person never requested this divorce, never asked for revenge, and never filed a single complaint against anyone involved." A wave of emotion swept through the room. Family members exchanged stunned glances. The attorneys quietly closed their files. Everything they believed they understood about this case was collapsing. Your soulmate slowly whispered, "After everything that happened, they still never tried to hurt me?" The judge gently shook his head. "No. Those two letters shattered whatever emotional walls your soulmate still had left. For years they had convinced themselves that you hated them, that you had forgotten them, that you wanted nothing to do with them. But the truth standing before them was painfully different. You had simply disappeared into silence, carrying a broken heart instead of anger." Your soulmate covered their face. "I don't deserve that kind of forgiveness." No one answered, because no one in the courtroom knew what to say. One elderly woman sitting quietly in the back suddenly stood up. For most of the hearing she had remained silent. Now she slowly walked toward the center of the courtroom. Her hands were trembling. "I can't stay silent anymore." Every eye turned toward her. She looked directly at your soulmate. "There is something I should have admitted years ago." The room froze. She wiped away her tears before continuing. The day you were told that this person had chosen someone else. I already knew that wasn't true. A collective gasp spread through the courtroom. I was afraid. My family begged me not to interfere. They said telling the truth would create even bigger problems. So, I remained silent. Her voice broke. And my silence helped destroy two innocent hearts. The confession struck everyone like lightning. Several relatives began crying openly. Others quietly apologized to one another. Years of hidden guilt finally surfaced all at once. Don't skip. Because the next revelation changed everything. The elderly woman reached into her handbag. Very carefully. She removed a small, worn notebook tied together with an old ribbon. I've carried this every single day. She handed it to your soulmate. Inside were handwritten entries recorded over many years. Each page documented another lie. Another hidden conversation. Another attempt someone had made to keep you apart. There were dates, names, places, even signatures. Everything matched the evidence already presented earlier that day. There was no longer any doubt. The separation had never been caused by a lack of love. It had been caused by fear, manipulation, and the silence of people who should have spoken sooner. Your soulmate could barely breathe. They gently closed the notebook and looked toward the judge. I came here believing I was ending the last chapter of my life. They paused. But now I realize. My real story was stolen before it ever had the chance to finish. The judge slowly nodded. He looked at the unsigned divorce papers one final time. Then, in front of everyone, he carefully pushed them aside. The court will not force a decision while serious new evidence continues to emerge. Hope quietly returned to the room. For the first time in years, your soulmate felt something they thought had disappeared forever. Not certainty. Not victory. Hope. But before anyone could speak again, the stranger who had delivered the final envelope stepped forward one last time. I almost forgot. There was one final instruction. From inside their coat, they removed a tiny sealed packet that had never been opened. Attached to it was a note written many years earlier. Only open this after every lie has been exposed. Your soulmate stared at it in disbelief. Slowly, they unfolded the note. Inside was a single address. And a short handwritten sentence. If your heart still believes in the truth, this is where your next chapter begins. Your soulmate looked at the address and instantly recognized exactly where it was. Without saying another word, they whispered your name. Then they turned toward the courtroom doors, ready to begin the search that should have started years ago. The courtroom doors slowly closed behind your soulmate. For the first time in many years, they were no longer walking toward an ending. They were walking toward the truth. The address written on the small piece of paper led to a quiet little town several hours away. During the journey, your soulmate barely spoke. The notebook, the letters, the old photographs, and the promise ring remained beside them the entire time. Every mile felt like another piece of the past returning. Their heart carried only one question. Will I be too late? As evening settled across the sky, they finally arrived. The address pointed to a small house surrounded by tall trees and blooming flowers. It wasn't grand or luxurious. It was peaceful. The kind of place someone chooses after surviving years of heartbreak. Your soulmate stood outside the gate for several long moments. They had imagined this meeting thousands of times. But now that it was real, their courage almost disappeared. Finally, they walked forward and gently knocked on the door. A few quiet seconds passed. Then the door slowly opened. For the first time in years,